Nostalgia. A sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically a period or place with happy associations. In today's day and age, the gaming community is all about graphics and multiplayer. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. It's also about DLC and loot boxes. But today we're not talking about the present. We're actually going to travel back in time. Back to a time that many refer to as the golden age of gaming. The 90s. Growing up in the 90s, I remember playing games like Ocarina of Time, Super Mario World, Twisted Metal, and several other games. As years went by, I got older and I had a couple games under my belt. Now I don't remember my age, but I was a pretty young man. And I remember that I had saved up so much gil, hint hint. I had so much gil that I had told my brother, my older brother, that I was going to be purchasing my very first game. I'd worked so hard, well not really, I just really saved up money my parents gave me. So when I told my brother this, he actually went ahead and recommended to me that I buy Final Fantasy X. Now what's Final Fantasy, I thought to myself as a young man. That name was ingrained into my mind forever. So I vividly remember going to the store and I actually decided to purchase Final Fantasy X because of my brother's recommendation. Little did I actually know is that my brother wanted me to buy this game so he could play it for himself. I know. I look back and laugh at that moment, but this was my first introduction to the Final Fantasy series. Anyways, enough about Final Fantasy X. We're actually going to save that for another video. Today, we're actually focusing on Final Fantasy VII. So at some point in my teenage years, I had the urge to play some of the older Final Fantasy games. Now, my older brother that convinced me to buy Final Fantasy X actually had a friend who had the original copy of Final Fantasy VII. And to my surprise now, as an adult, he actually let us borrow his copy of Final Fantasy VII, which, by the way, let me tell you, it was in perfect condition. Don't know why he let us borrow it, but he did. Well, actually I do, because I would want someone to experience this game as well. So whenever he let us borrow the game, I was excited, I was ready to play because my brother had bragged about how wonderful and how exciting this game was. He told me that this was the best Final Fantasy. Keep in mind, I had already played a couple of the games, so I'm thinking to myself, how can Final Fantasy VII, how can this game be so much better than the rest? Now, I remember loading this game up into the PlayStation 2. I remember starting the game up and listening to the prelude. I could already tell that this game was revolutionary for its time, even if I hadn't experienced it myself. The game had 3D graphics, which was unheard of back in the day, and it had an amazing soundtrack. Now, in this day and age, the graphics are not the greatest. I mean, we all remember Cloud's blocky arms, right? Once you finally start up the game, you're introduced immediately into the first cutscene of the game. You're gazing upon the stars and they slowly fade into a blissful young soul. That blissful soul would later on become Aerith. Aerith then proceeds to walk down a dark alley, eventually getting to a main street near the Goblin's Bar. The camera then begins to zoom out and we see the full scale of Midgar, the world's most technologically advanced city. Shortly after this, we get the Final Fantasy VII logo and enters in some support characters and the main character, Cloud Strife. Now he does jump off the train fashionably with some sort of unrealistic flip, but hey, who am I to judge? So at this point, this is when the game actually begins, and this is when you're introduced to the first battle of the game. Now at this point, you're fighting with two Shinra grunts. And this is where we really get into the combat system. It really makes you feel at ease. It's something that feels familiar and it's well crafted. Now again, I started my Final Fantasy journey by playing Final Fantasy X, but I could already see the resemblance in the combat. Now, Final Fantasy VII features what's called the ATB system, which is known as Active Time Battle. Once the ATB system gauge is filled up, that is when your party members can actually perform actions. So this is when you actually can launch an attack. This is when you can go ahead and cast a spell. This is when you can go ahead and summon powerful creatures to aid you in battle. Now, as you progress through the game, you also unlock other abilities known as limit breaks. As your characters take damage, they have a limit break meter that actually builds up. All you basically have to know is that limit breaks, pretty much you can do some badass stuff. okay? And what I mean by badass stuff is just think about Cloud as Omni Slash. These are basically ultimate movesets for your characters that do massive damage. You counter. Boom, boom, boom. There you go, Sephiroth. It's all up. It's all over here. And, you know, I thought I was going to get my ass kicked. I was like, well, Sephiroth is shirtless. He's got a badass katana. It looks serious. But no. Turns out it doesn't go that way. No need to say any more on that. Now, the materia system is actually something that drove me insane the first time I played Final Fantasy VII. And no, not because it was horrible, but because it was crafted by the hands of ancients. Well, maybe not, but it was beautifully crafted. Now, the materia system allowed for your characters to play any roles. For example, I can throw some materia on Cloud and easily make him a white mage. Now, is that the best decision to make? Probably not, but if I wanted to, Cloud could be my white mage. The materia system allows you to mix and choose how you want to play your characters. Doesn't matter who it is, they are able to cast any spell as long as you put that materia on them. Now, of course, different materias have different attributes that either bump up your character's magic attacks, maybe lowers his strength, but you have unlimited customization when it comes to the materia system. Now, lastly, summons. Summons are incredibly gorgeous in this game. There's a huge selection when it comes to summon materia. For example, you can summon Bahamut, Neo Bahamut, and Bahamut Zero in this game. And not only that, guys, but each summon has its own cutscene, which some of them are a bit long, but they are definitely worth watching. This by far was one of my best experiences whenever I first played the game. Being able to summon these incredibly powerful creatures to cause insane amount of damage and destruction was incredible. It was a good feeling. I mean, guys, just think about it. Whenever you summon Bahamut Zero and he's coasting through space, right? And he opens up his wings and begins to charge up Terra Flare and then unleashes that amount of energy onto the enemy is incredible. These animations, man. they take quite a while. Oh, yes. Can't believe we're already here. That's so crazy to me. It's been a journey. Already? What? That was it? Now, I've summoned these types of creatures in other games like Final Fantasy X, and nothing was on the scale of these summons in Final Fantasy VII. I will tell you that right now. Although Bahamut in Final Fantasy X was pretty badass. Now, there's other minor things that I really enjoyed about this. For example, you get to, control the airship and travel across the world. You get a little dune buggy in which you can travel different roads in. You also get a submarine and you go underwater. That is incredible. I would love to do that in these modern Final Fantasy games, but it's not there. And these little things such as flying the airship, getting to go into the ocean, and getting that little car to travel across land is what makes Final Fantasy VII such a memorable experience. So disc 1 is perhaps the most enjoyable disc out of the 3 in this game. So you start off by meeting Barret and 3 other members of Avalanche. Avalanche is basically a rebel group that's fighting against a huge corporation known as Shinra. What Shinra does is that they steal the life energy of the planet and use it to convert it into energy to sell for profit. So what Avalanche does is they hire Cloud, a former ex-soldier, not really, to help them with their cause. So Cloud and Avalanche end up blowing 1 out of the 8 reactors in Midgar that is sucking the energy from this planet. So think of it today as in modern world, right? Basically, we're causing an explosion to a reactor that is full of so much energy. So as you can tell, it's going to create a massive explosion that's going to cause a lot of destruction. I can see why Avalanche did what they did, but personally myself, I think of all the people that lost their lives because of this explosion. And to me, it just paints Avalanche as this terroristic group. After everything goes down with the explosion, you see everybody in Midgar just going crazy, people calling Avalanche terrorist, which I can definitely see why they would. So after the explosion, we meet Aerith for the first time. She's selling flowers out in the Midgar slums, and she sells it for about 1 gil. And honestly, I don't know how she's making a living off this, but hey, shout out to her for being an entrepreneur. Now, as the game progresses, you start to meet more characters like Tifa, which is my girlfriend, by the way. Zach, can we get an F in the chat for Zach? Please, F in the chat for Zach. We get to meet Nanaki, Vincent, Yuffie, Kate Sith, which by the way, I don't like Kate Sith. We also get to meet good old Sid, and of course, Sephiroth. Now, the reason why I think Disc 1 is the most enjoyable is because each character gets their own backstory. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you one example here. So listen closely. So later in the game, whenever you're heading towards North Corel, that's where Barrett is from. You get to actually find out a lot about his past. Now, if you know Corel, it is not probably a vacation destination, and you actually get to find out that Barrett is to blame for the destruction of this town. Now, as we all know from the very beginning of the game, Barrett is a tough, loudmouth machine who doesn't care what anyone has to say. Point where we get locked up and get out. Holy crap, man. Oh, they punched Barrett. And Barrett's just gonna take it. That's not like Barrett. Never thought I'd see your face again. That would suck, going back to your hometown and just being treated like that. I mean, I understand where the people were coming from, but still, man, that's intense. Man, that's not even like Barrett either. Now for Barrett, that's actually very strange. You would imagine that Barrett would react by cussing up a storm and trying to fight them. Now, as you keep progressing through the story, you actually find out that Corel was actually once a mining town, and that Shinra was wanting to build a Mako reactor there. Now, Scarlet, a character that we won't get into, persuades Barrett, which then persuades Dyne, which is Barrett's best friend, to allow the reactor to basically be built. Now, one day when Barrett and Dyne are both out of town, the reactor explodes. And what Shinra does is that they immediately accuse the townspeople of this. They go on to say that the townspeople of Corel are a terroristic group. So they end up burning Corel down to the ground. I remember seeing all this for the first time, and so many emotions were running through me. I couldn't believe what was actually happening before my eyes. I put myself in their shoes. They lost everything. Because of this, Barrett and Dyne end up in a really bad situation. As they were being shot at, Dyne ends up actually hanging off a cliff, hanging onto Barrett's arm. And he's clenching Barrett's arm for dear life. What Scarlet does is she ends up shooting Barrett's arm and eventually causes Dyne to fall into the ravine. So towards the end of Barrett's story, we find out that Dyne is actually still alive, but he's gone mad with anger. Dyne goes on to tell Barrett that he's lost everything. He lost his wife, his daughter. Barrett tries to explain to Dyne that his daughter Marlene is actually still alive and under his care, but Dyne still picks a fight with Barrett. Now this goes on to become a one-on-one fight between two men who lost everything to Shinra. Two men who were once best friends. Two men that had endured so much pain, and it was all being thrown out on the battlefield. After the battle, Dyne goes on to explain how he wants to destroy everything, including himself. He even goes on to say that his own daughter would no longer recognize him. And at this point, Dyne tosses his wife's pendant over to Barrett and tells him to give it over to Marlene. And what he does next, he jumps off the cliff. Now this is why Disc 1 is so great. You get stories like this, and you get to relate on a personal level with the characters. You begin to develop these emotions and attachments to them. Now personally myself, Nanaki's story is by far the saddest, but we will need to save that for another day. At the end of Disc 1, we learned so much about each character. Aerith, a character that we immediately fell in love with, goes through so many things by the end of Disc 1. We all know that Aerith ends up at the City of Ancients at an altar praying, and as Aerith looks up to Cloud with a smile, Sephiroth comes dropping down from the ceiling, stabbing Aerith.
Oh, there it is. Oh my god. It happened. I got chills. Why, Sephiroth? Why would you do this, bro? Oh my god. Oh my god.
I can only imagine everyone's initial reactions when this game was first released and whenever they seen Aerith get killed by Sephiroth. It was so surreal actually seeing this happen in a game. I would never have thought that a game could be so emotional and so dark. And as you see Sephiroth slowly pulling out his katana, the materia in Aerith's hair drops. Once it hits the ground, the music begins to play.
Oh gosh, that theme.
You were sad. You were angry and you were confused. You wanted to yell at your TV screen, but ultimately, there's nothing that you could do to prevent this. And the sad thing is that you know that you can't do anything about it. And that concludes Disc 1. Now Disc 2, this is where we actually dive more into the history of our main character, Cloud. So the first time I had actually played this game, I was under the impression that Cloud was always an ex-soldier. But there were some strange things about Cloud and his backstory that just didn't really make sense. So in Disc 2, we're actually introduced to Sephiroth visiting Nibelheim. Now Nibelheim is actually where Cloud and Tifa are originally from. Now what Cloud and Sephiroth were actually doing in Nibelheim is that they were investigating a Mako reactor. Apparently there was some monsters in the area that they had to investigate, so of course they're going to dispatch the best of the best. They're going to send Cait Sith. That was a joke. Obviously Sephiroth and Cloud were sent. However, the second time that we see this cutscene in Disc 2, instead of seeing Cloud with Sephiroth, we see another man, a man with spiky black hair. Now we already know, guys, that obviously this is Zack, so can we get another F in the chat for Zack, please? Anywho, we see all that play out, and we come to find out that basically Cloud is living a lie. To be fair, Cloud was actually there, but he was just one of the regular Shinra guys. So we see a lot of other things happen in Disc 2, which I'm not going to get into much detail about, but pretty much Cloud gives Sephiroth the black materia, the weapons awaken, Scarlet locks up Tifa in a gas chamber, and they have an epic slap match. Probably one of the best scenes in the game, and I hope this really makes it into the remake. I am ready for that. We also see things like Sapphire weapon attacking, and we also find out that Cloud goes through Mako poisoning yet again. Woohoo! As if he already hadn't gone through it. So the most important element of this disc is that we actually get to reassemble Cloud and his memories, because while he has Mako poisoning, we basically have to dive into his subconscious and figure out and piece everything back together. Now, probably the most intense part of Disc 2 is actually getting to see how everything went down at Nibelheim. He actually remembers Zack being cut down by Sephiroth. Go to the Nibelheim Shinra mansion in the basement laboratory. Okay, will do. Look at Zack. Zack's going in. He's going to try to kill Sephiroth. It was Zack who came to Nibelheim. Then where were you, Cloud? This is it, the big reveal, guys. Boom! Zack got beat by Sephiroth. Here it is. I saw everything. Getting chills, man. He grabbed the Buster Sword. Zack ran right by her, jerk. I know, right? Since you don't know about the basement part, apparently I did too. It's a nice surprise. I feel like I might... Uh-oh. There we go. He stabbed Sephiroth. Tifa, Mom, Tifa, my hometown. Give it back. I think you can give it back, boy. I admired you. I don't know how Cloud was able to pull that off, honestly. But he did. Cloud, take off the mask. There he is, boys and girls. That's what happened. By the way, Sephiroth is a jerk. He actually hurt Tifa during the Nibelheim visit. So this is such a sick place. I love it. GP, I love you. Welcome to the stream. Oh god. It would cut to this. Oh my god. Sephiroth, we got some beef, bro. We got some beef. We better throw hands. I remember this pretty vividly. Cloud was obviously not in Soldier, so he's not really much of a match for Sephiroth, but Sephiroth was weakened by Zack. Sephiroth actually stabs Cloud and lifts him up into the air with his Masamune. Now that takes a lot of strength, so maybe I don't want to mess with Sephiroth. So I might just leave it up to Cloud and the gang for that. Even though Cloud never made it into Soldier, he was actually able to get back onto the ground and lift up Sephiroth by holding the Masamune and eventually flinging Sephiroth, causing him to fall into the live stream. Dude. Holy crap. Cloud was shy at first, but when he met Zack, he became funny and self-confident. That's good. R.I.P. Sephiroth. For now. Dude, that was pretty badass of Cloud to do. Now, this was all jaw-dropping for me. So many questions had been answered. Shortly after all this, all of Cloud's memories were restored. And that basically concludes Disc 2. Now, Disc 3, basically, we get to see Zack's death. Effin' chat yet again. We get to go to space, which is freaking dope. Diamond Weapon gets destroyed. We find out Sephiroth's origins by Hojo. And then the final fight with Sephiroth. Bam! Disc 3 is concluded. Now, I don't really know how to classify this video because it's sort of a quick recap, I guess, and why I love this game so much. I guess it's more about my experience with the game. Anyways, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to go ahead and use your limit break on that like button and summon the will to hit that subscribe button as well. And if you wouldn't mind, leave a comment down below if you would like to see more videos like this, me talking about older games and my experience with them. Or maybe even character analysis. This is definitely a new type of video for me, so I don't have much experience in it, so please bear with me. But it was interesting. Anyways, that's all I got. Thank you so much for hearing me out. All of you have a beautiful day, and I will be seeing you next time. Bye-bye.